All right. As I said, good morning, everyone. My name is Bill Mickey, and on behalf of Choice and ACRL, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Driving Student Success, Leveraging Technology to Connect Libraries, Faculty, and Students, which is sponsored by Ex Libris, part of Clarivate. This session is one in a series of sponsored webinars from Choice and ACRL that addresses new ideas and developments of interest to the academic library community. Before we get started, I'd like to point out a few features of the webinar software. All of the attendees who join the presentation are automatically muted and your cameras are off, so don't worry about generating noise or feedback. We've got that taken care of for you. In the main area of the screen, you can follow along with the presentation materials. To adjust the size of the slides or video, you can use the divider in the middle of the screen to slide the sizes to your liking. We are using the Q&A feature today. Please use it to ask questions of our speakers and to submit any comments. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for at the end of the presentation. So please type your questions into the Q&A module as they occur to you. Also, there is closed captioning available for today's session. To toggle the automated captions on or off, please use the CC button on the bottom right corner of your screen. Last, please note that we are recording today's program and everyone who registered should receive a follow-up email with a link to the archived version. And with that, we are ready to get started. So I will hand it over to Matt and take it away, Matt.
Excellent. Thanks, Bill. And thank you, everyone who's joined us for today's webinar on driving student success, leveraging technology to connect libraries, faculties, and students. And that's really, what we're about here, libraries, faculties, and students, and trying to join the dots. So we're going to be talking a little bit about a number of surveys that we undertook and really trying to get to a 360-degree view of those three: the library, the librarians, the faculty, and students, really around how course material access really impacts student outcomes, and give you insights into the barriers or perceived barriers preventing better access to those materials. So you'll be pleased to know that I'm only asking questions as well as offering the good looks from the side here. We're ably joined by the very wonderful Jessie and Zara. So I wonder if I can ask Zara first and then Jessie just to do some introductions, and then I'll talk a little bit about myself and we'll crack on with some questions. Just before I do, just to say, as Bill mentioned, please ask any questions as we go through in the panel. We've got time at the end to answer those, and we'd love to make the session as interactive as possible. So, feel free to ask those questions and we will circle back to that. So, Zara, please tell us a little bit about yourself. And yeah.
Thanks, Matt, and hi, everybody. I'm Zara Lawson. I'm a research director, and I won't read my whole title, at Alterline. And Alterline are a specialist higher education research agency with a real passion and drive for conducting research, which can improve the student experience. So as Matt sort of alluded to today, I'll be bringing, I guess, that student perspective on the topics at hand. And whilst we at Alterline, we work across a wide range of the whole university experience, and we also have quite a speciality in library services with our user experience product, Library Life Pulse, but also a wide range of deep dive insight work into more topical areas such as the impact of libraries on student well-being and diversity, equity and inclusion. And I'll pass you over then to Jessie to introduce herself.
Great, thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Jessie Ransom, and I'm a senior product manager for Leganto. And Leganto is the course materials solution from Ex Libris. So it's a solution that makes it easier for the library to help support students and faculty in their courses and help faculty and the library better communicate about course materials. So as we're going through the panel today, I'll be representing the faculty and the library side of the conversation. So you'll get to see all three of these different perspectives. I've been with Ex Libris for about 8 years, and I've been working specifically with Leganto for about 5. So as part of this role, I do talk to a number of libraries around the globe around what they're trying to do to support course materials, to support students in their courses. And I'm really excited about the conversation today.
Excellent. Thank you, Jessie. Thank you, Zara. And last but very much least, I'm Matt. I'm Matt Sherlock, Director of Product Strategy at Campus M, part of Ex Libris Clarivate. My role as part of the Campus M team is to develop a mobile product, a web-based product that really is aimed at bringing your services to the students, whether that's Leganto, search and discovery, course materials, timetables, learning management systems. The Campus M platform is there to really bring those to the students' hands, if you like, directly through their mobile or through a browser. I've been at Ex Libris for 8 years. I've actually been working in higher ed for before that for 15 years, doing all sorts of weird and wonderful things. But I think the core strand of what I've always been involved in is student engagement and student experience, and that's something I'm truly passionate about. And you know, and hopefully we reflect that in the products that we produce. So the exciting bit, the questions and answer section. So I'm going to ask the panel a series of questions based on the surveys that we've undertaken, and hopefully you'll get some real insight into what comes out from those. So first up, I'm going to ask Zara just to give us some background on the Alterline survey, the one that was very student focused. It'd be good to understand, the backstory there, and I guess what are the key findings from that survey that really stood out to you around student outcomes.
Of course, thanks, Matt. So the report that Matt's just sort of referenced was really looking at student wants and needs from sort of delivering course materials, and really from a sort of student success perspective. And it's based on a survey of over 1,500 undergraduate and master's students across the US, UK and Australia. And you'll see from the slide here that it's sort of roughly equal numbers from each country that participated in that. And the participants came from a really wide range of backgrounds. So we got representations across multiple disciplines, and also part-time and full-time students. And we'll come, I think, a bit later on into some of the differences there that really show how different needs and expectations impact student success. And that's really important, I think, for us, really. So getting that overview, but also being able to hear from groups who might have those different expectations and needs from their institutions. And just, I think, to give everybody a bit of a flavour of some of the sort of key things that we found in this report. And Matt, if I ask you to go on to the next slide for me, please. There was a real clear indication from our research that students expect a real digital first experience when it comes to their course materials. 82% of the students we surveyed wanted more access to digital materials, and that's compared to only 61% who felt that they needed more access to physical materials. Now, this really isn't hugely surprising. It's a trend that we've seen on the rise very much over recent years, and particularly coming out of the pandemic as well. But again, it aligns with our own experiences really with digital devices. So we're all doing more shopping, more online discovery, and students really are reflecting that in their digital experiences and their expectations that the university will be delivering this on par with what they're getting elsewhere. This also made it quite striking, though, that just how strong that preference was for content that's easy to access. So 58% of the students that we surveyed wanted more often to be directly linked to materials available online, and 49% wanted the same direct links to resources in their university library. Actually, the type of resource that students really wanted to see less of was actually references to online resources that are not linked in any way directly to that material. So we're seeing really that easy access is incredibly important to students, alongside that content being quite digital and interactive. Another area that stood out for me, which we'll see on the next slide, was just how important the affordability of course materials was and how much that impacted students, and particularly students from the US. So as you can sort of see from the slide here, the vast majority of students in the UK and Australia felt that their institution should be providing all the course materials that they need, and that they shouldn't be necessarily expecting to buy anything on top of that. But that drops to only 40% of students in the US who expect that their institutions will provide everything they need. And they're much more likely to think that they're going to need to pay for at least some of the materials they need. But this is quite interesting, really, because students in the US, we found, seem to be more impacted by affordability. So overall, in our survey, 1 in 5 students have opted out of a course because of really prohibitively expensive course materials. But that rises to 36% of students in the US who have opted out because they couldn't afford those materials. That's almost 1 in 3 students whose choices are being impacted by financial concerns, and that has a really significant impact on their abilities to succeed on their course. Oh, I think you need to come off mute, Matt.
Every time. It's always the way, isn't it? There's always someone, and it's usually typically me. So yeah, thanks, Sarah, for that. Really, really interesting insight there. And I took a good look through the Alterline report, which is fascinating material. It's really insightful. And I was just picking up on some of those themes around accessing course materials, and particularly when a student can't get their hands on course materials, that the most popular choice for them to access that was to obtain an older version of the material, just not read the material. So this really does, I think, put them at a disadvantage compared to others in their class who are able to get their hands on the latest copy of the material. So thanks, Zara. Jesse, you're up next. Don't forget to unmute. Oh, you're good at this. So
like a pro.
yeah, like a pro. So yeah, I'd like to just talk to you a little bit about the library journal survey, and particularly about the survey this year, with building on what Zara was talking about. Did you find the references to student affordability in the context of how the library supports student success?
Sure. Yeah. So before I kind of dig into that, I'll talk a little bit about the library journal report itself. It's a report that was sponsored by Ex Libris, and I'm going to read you the title. It's kind of a long one, so listen closely. It's called The Impact of Libraries on Student Success, Perspectives from Academic Faculty and Librarians. So when we talk about the Library Journal report, this is the report that I guess we, or maybe just me, will be referencing. So it's a 2023 survey report, and Library Journal surveyed over 500 librarians and 500 faculty members and asked questions around the topic of how the library supports student success. So from my perspective, this is a really interesting survey. I'll tell you, I'm a librarian myself, and I speak with many librarians all day long. But it was really interesting for me to see kind of the way that the library represents themselves and kind of reported on the actions that they're taking and the things that they're doing. But you can also see the faculty perceptions. How do the faculty perceive the library? What are they saying that their library is doing? So it's a really nice way to look at kind of both sides of how the library is supporting students and what the library is doing. So that's just a plug for the report itself. But your question was actually about affordability. So I'll say what Zara just represented is not surprising to me. I'm based out of the US, and this is definitely what we've been hearing from students for many years now about access to course materials. So if we look at the library side of it, you can go to the next slide, and I have one of the questions that was asked in this Library Journal report. So what we saw is that, can you go to the next? There it is. Okay. So what we saw is that this is a question that we asked libraries or librarians: how does the library contribute to undergrad success? And the top one is providing library resources to support coursework. You can see this is a huge number. 94% of the librarians that were surveyed said that this is something that they're doing. So this is, obviously a very significant way that libraries are contributing to, this affordability piece. There's some other ones in here that also kind of align with this affordability conversation. There's a fairly high percentage of librarians who chose collaboration with faculty around course requirements to inform collection building. 79, that one's kind of a mouthful for me, but essentially collection development in support of courses is how I interpret this. So a significant number of libraries that are doing this. And this one's actually interesting to me, 79%. This is a huge number, and this has changed over the years as I've been working with libraries around this course materials conversation. I used to hear, we don't buy course materials. We don't buy things for courses. And that's not the case anymore. Many libraries are doing this. They're specifically investing in course materials and specifically kind of helping to take on this affordability challenge. There's another one in here: addressing textbook affordability issues, course reserves, digital alternatives, etc. This came in at 73%. So all three of these choices are efforts to support learning affordability, making sure that the library collection provides the materials that students need in their courses. There's a really great story for the library to tell here. It's a great way for the library to, help support students. And if you kind of tie this to what Zara has already shared and some of the other, information that's come out about the impact of very expensive course materials, this is a really great way for the library to help contribute and to really have that impact on the student experience and student success, and helping to provide students with affordable access to these resources. One of the other questions actually in the Library Journal report is about how libraries are measuring their impact towards student success. And for the most part, it's largely anecdotal. We heard that this made a difference. But I think from a learning affordability perspective, this is an area where the library can also really measure the impact. We have customers who are doing this, who are calculating how much the library collection is saving students in their courses. And it varies, depending on the size of the customer, the type of the school, but I see between, $1 million and $6 million per year. So this is obviously, a huge has a huge impact on the student experience, and is of course also a really great story for the library to be able to tell about, the impact of their collection and the work that they're doing. But if we switch to the other side and look at this from the faculty perspective, we also asked faculty how often do they consider library resources in their courses, and only 13% said rarely or never. So that was nice to see that for the most part, faculty are reporting that they're at least considering using library resources. We also asked them if they think library resources increase engagement, or if library resources have an impact on student performance. And for this one, 63% said yes. So 63% of the faculty said that they think library resources or using library resources impacts students' performance. So this is really great to see as well. But I think the challenge that kind of sits with this, we can see both sides are sort of focused on this piece, but the challenge I think is in how to bridge this gap between the two groups. The library needs to know which resources are used in courses, and they need to be able to let students know that they have the resources and how to access those resources. So this is another challenge. And this is something that came up in the report as well. If you go to the next slide, we specifically asked about the barriers that library staff face in impacting student success. I feel like you probably won't be surprised by the answers that are at the top here. 4 of the top 5 are basically not enough time, not enough money, not enough staff. I feel like in some ways these are all actually the same thing. But the other one that rose to the top here is lack of communication from faculty about course needs. This came in at 52%. So we know that there is a communication problem. I personally hear about this every day. I'm sure that many of the people on this call experience this every day. This is, I think, one of the biggest challenges in actually sort of working to solve this problem. Actually, while we're on this slide, I'll point out another one that I found really interesting, which is further down on the list. 37% of librarians said lack of interest from students is a barrier for libraries in contributing to academic success. So this one is interesting to me. It's always a topic of conversation for us on the Leganto side. The first step is to make sure that there is access, that students can actually get to these resources. But then the next piece of this is, how do you get them to actually do the readings? How do you get them to actually engage with the resources, to get them to care? And this is more the student success piece, which of course is the topic of the conversation today. So definitely it's about providing access. I think that's, you can't have the second step if you don't have any access. But beyond that, getting students to actually engage with these readings is the second steps toward that student success and the learning experience. Anyway, I think I'm sort of rambling here. The Library Journal report, kind of to summarize, what we can see here is that both faculty and the library are both focused on providing access to resource, using more affordable content than maybe what we've seen in the past. But they're also reporting that the students themselves may not be actually interested in these resources. So with that, I'll pass it back to you to look more at the other side.
Excellent, thank you, Jessie. So lots of material there. I know we've had a few questions about access to surveys and such like, so I've put some of those links in response to those questions. So if anyone's interested in those, take a look at some of those links. Jessie, just before I let you off the hook on that one, just a quick clarification. Get my teeth in. I can't say it. Clarification question. Someone asks, when the report says library materials, does this include textbooks or just supporting documentation?
It doesn't specify. It doesn't specify which resources the library is providing for courses.
Providing, yeah, okay, no worries. Excellent. So, Zara, over to you. So on the topic of barriers to student success, I wonder if you can expand on the other challenges that students might face in terms of course material access.
Yeah, happy to do that. So I think there's two angles we can sort of look at access here, or rather, I guess, barriers to access, whether those barriers are real or perceived. And the first sort of angle really is around that more ease of actually getting those materials and getting to those materials. So if you take a look at the slide below, you can see here that 66% of students that we surveyed agreed that it was easy to access course materials through their institution. So I mean, on the face of it, that's kind of okay. 2/3 of students, you know, they think it's easy, but what that really leaves is sort of 34% of students who aren't finding that easy. And when we dug into why that is, it came really back to some of the things I was speaking about earlier, in which Jessie also touched on a little bit as well, around affordability, but also really that ease of ease of access as well. So when students were asked what difficulties have you faced when accessing course materials, 51% said they just simply couldn't find the materials that they were looking for. And that was the most common difficulty that was reported by students. That was then followed by broken links and needing to pay. So again, we're seeing that affordability angle coming back there. The second angle that we can sort of think about this access thing from, if I can move to the next slide, please, Matt, is around device use and what devices students are using to access these course materials. So I don't think it will surprise anyone to know that laptops were the most popular device to read course materials. But what we did find was really that mobile use was also really high, with 54% of students using a smartphone and 27% using a tablet to read their course materials. And so that really demonstrated to us that there was really important that these materials can be accessed through mobile devices as well as through desktop. One of the things I sort of touched on earlier, I thought was quite important, really is around how this experience differs between the different student groups, and we do see a sort of diversity, equity and inclusion aspect to this here. So part-time students who we know are more likely to be juggling competing priorities, more likely to be working on the go and trying to get things done on the go. They're much more likely to be using a smartphone, a tablet or an ebook reader than full-time students are. So the real need there to be able to empower those students to use mobile devices to access reading materials, which really will also then in turn impact student outcomes. And I'll pass that, I think, back to you, Matt, then.
Excellent. So thanks, Sarah. And my ears pricked up then. You may have noticed when you started talking about devices and mobile and all the rest of it, it may be heading into my area of the woods there. So, you know, we're passionate about providing access everywhere, really, wherever they need it, whenever they need it. So it's really good to see and understand these numbers around consumption and what people are, you know, how students are consuming services on you know, on the go, wherever and whenever they need them. So that's really insightful there. So Jessie, coming back to you, and reflecting back, flip side to the library journal report, I guess, what were the librarian and faculty take on course material access?
So access in and of itself wasn't really mentioned, but there are some survey responses that kind of tie in with this topic. So faculty talk about the library not having what they need. So this would be an access issue from the student perspective. The library talks about not having the budget to be able to purchase things, which of course also becomes an access issue. But by itself, there aren't any questions that are just purely about access to these resources. And this is kind of interesting also to think about, where we're looking at different questions from the student side versus the faculty side, of course, because, or sorry, the faculty and librarian side, they have different needs. But in the work that faculty and students, or faculty, I keep mixing this up, faculty and librarians are doing certainly is in support of access, but it wasn't part of the survey itself.
So, yeah, okay. So, granted, not directly referenced. So maybe reflecting on the report itself and your own experiences. I wonder if you can comment on the barriers to the library actually contributing to student success more generally.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest barriers is, I think I may have mentioned this before, but really this communication between libraries and faculty. I think that's largely what it comes down to. And I'll go through some of the things that came up in the report. So 8 out of 10 of the librarians that were surveyed said that faculty in their institution are receptive to the idea of integrating library resources into their courses. And actually, of that 8 out of 10, 22% said they're very receptive. So this is very close to what we see on the faculty side. Both groups are focused on this. On this slide, you can go ahead to the chart there. Yep. So on this slide, this is one of the questions that we asked faculty. How often do you integrate library resources into your undergraduate courses? So you can see here some really nice numbers. Almost 2/3 of the faculty answered that they either always or usually integrate library resources. But then we also dug in to some of the challenges in incorporating these library resources, and this is perhaps more interesting for the conversation today. So if you go into the next slide, we can see what faculty said when we asked them about the challenges in using library resources. The first one here is the materials that I want are not available at the library. So this was the first response that we got. And this is interesting to me, actually, going back to the question that was asked earlier about textbooks, because that was kind of the first thing that my mind went to when I saw this answer here is, what are they actually using in their courses? What is it that they want that they say is not available through the library? We know that there are many challenges for libraries in, providing specifically textbooks. I do work with many libraries, and I'm sure many of you are doing this as well, but there are certainly many libraries out there who have created pretty extensive textbook collections. I see this in partnership with the bookstore sometimes, or I see, where faculty are actually donating copies of textbooks to the library to help students. But generally speaking, we know that this is an area where, regardless of your budget, regardless of what you would like to be able to do, you just may not be able to get the resources. So that's the first thing that I thought of when I saw this answer here. The second thing that I thought is, it could also be that the library would buy the resources if they knew that you needed it. If they knew that what faculty were using. I talked to a lot of librarians who tell stories about, oh, we find out because the students come in and they ask for things. So it's not that the library wouldn't doesn't have it, it's that they don't have it yet. And this is coming back again to that communication challenge of being able to know in advance what faculty are using so that the library can purchase these resources. If we look at some of the other answers that are on here, 24% say there's too much time and effort to coordinate with the library about the resources that they need. Again, this is really about communication, like that, bridging those gaps between the two different groups. 20% say lack of communication from the library, that they're not getting information from the library about what to do here. So for these, I actually want to look at the flip side of these. These kind of look like high numbers on the slide, just sort of with the way that the graph looks here. But it also means that over 3/4 of faculty are not saying these things. 3/4 of faculty don't say that there's a lack of communication from the library. They're not having difficulty communicating with the library. It's clear to me that the library is indeed reaching faculty, but I also think that, again, this is an area where there's more work to be done. There's more opportunities here. And also, you know, again, that as we've talked about up to now, this is an area where bridging that gap and improving these processes can have an impact, a big impact on student access and student success. Back to you. Oh,
Done it again. I need a big red button, don't I? So thanks again, Jesse. So you know, just reflecting on what you were saying there about the communications challenges, I think, you know, I think that feeds back to the students as well. And I was just reflecting on a quote I'll pull out here. So one student quoted in the Alterline report said that lecturers and libraries should work together to provide a wider range of reading materials and course resources to better facilitate student success in their assignments and examinations. So, you know, I don't think the students are operating in a vacuum. They see some of this disconnect as well there. So I'm just mindful that, you know, we're getting towards the back end of the presentation. I do want to make sure that we've got time for questions. That's another prompt for if you do have any questions, please, you know, put them into the Q&A panel, and I'll reflect them back to the panelists here. So I just wanted to say, come back to you, Zara and Jesse this time. Really, if there's one thing that you wanted our listeners to take away from the discussion this afternoon, what would it be? And who wants to go first? Go on, Zara, because you're first in my line. Yeah.
You first. It's look at the draw there. Yeah, I mean, I think Jesse's reflected on this quite a lot, probably between sort of library and faculty, but thinking about then, well, the library and faculty back to students is really around, again, that communication challenge. So we know that students do know they can come to their library for course materials, but it doesn't always seem to be translating across to them. And when it is translating across to them, that seems to sometimes be at almost a critical point, and one where they're not necessarily going to get that message as easily. So I think Jesse said earlier about lack of interest from students being an obstacle to sort of impacting success. And you know, we've seen from, you know, in this research and other research that you know, it's a lot easier said than done getting students to be interested, because particularly they are engaging and coming to libraries for support when they're at a critical point, when they just need that material now because their deadline is looming, and that makes it a really, really challenging time, I think, for libraries to be able to get across all the other messages that they need to, when students, again, may not actually be interested in those because of the sort of mind frame that they're in at the time. But really getting that bit right is quite important, and really being able to take those extra steps to communicate, and make sure students know what's available to them, how to access them, and that they're able to access them easily across the board. It's probably one of the most important things for and make the most difference really for students who are struggling both, you know, with the affordability side of things, and are very often time constraints.
Sarah, Jesse?
Great. Yep. So I think I would say kind of the same thing. I think it all comes down to some of these communication challenges, especially looking at the faculty and the library side of this. You know, I think everybody's busy. We know that, and I think we have to acknowledge that. But having these kind of gaps in communication is causing different workflow challenges that impact students. So if we take the example of broken links, I think Zara shared that 50% of students said that they were encountering broken links, if I'm remembering correctly. So I think this is a really good example of sort of some of the mess that might exist. So generally speaking, when there is a broken link, the student reports it to their professor, who tells the library, who fixes the link, who sends a good link back to the professor, who shares that new link with their student. This is a very cumbersome workflow. So it's a workflow that makes it harder for faculty and the library to work together, but it also is more time consuming for the student and causes the student real challenges and potentially long delays in trying to access those resources. I'm trying to be conscious of not like digging too deeply into Leganto itself, but at its core, it's a solution that's designed to help solve some of these types of challenges, because faculty, librarians, and students are all working in the same system. And it's then sort of solving for this communication platform. The library can work directly with students around these broken links. The different stakeholders can interact directly with each other. So this can really cut out some of these extra steps for everyone involved, which solving that, bridging that communication gap means that the library knows what's used in courses, students know if the library has these resources. But I think regardless of Leganto itself, this is largely about this communication and being able to communicate across these three different stakeholders to make sure that that everybody is having a good experience, but especially that students are able to get to the resources that they need.
Excellent. Thank you, Jessie, and thank you, Zara. So those, I guess, are the end of our panel questions, our pre-prepared panel questions. So what I'd like to do is now start putting you on the spot with some of our questions from the audience. And please, if you've got any questions, put them in the Q&A panel, and I'll ask those as we go through. So I've got a few questions already to get us started. So just read through these. So I've got a question here about does the fact that libraries are providing coursework affect the campus bookstore, i.e. less need to purchase from the bookstore? So Jessie, I don't know whether that's one you want to yeah.
From what I have seen, this varies from one institution to another. So I think it probably depends on your bookstore and depends on maybe the partnership that you've seen that you have with your bookstore or the goals of your bookstore. I'm not going to say too much about that, but what I have seen actually, I think because student affordability is getting so much recognition right now, this is a very public challenge that higher ed is facing. There's a lot of criticism about the cost of higher ed and the cost of course materials. And I think because of that, I do see a lot of schools where the bookstore is actually partnering with the library to provide a copy of each book, or to point students to library resources where they are available. Or I know a lot of schools will have that the bookstore has to indicate if there's no cost for, or the university is indicating if there's no cost for the resource. So I think that's not the case everywhere, but I do see a lot of schools where the library is able to establish a good partnership with the bookstore, because ultimately it's about students and the student experience. I think also, I already mentioned this, but libraries generally can't buy, you're not going to buy enough copies of a textbook to support all of the students anyway. There, I believe anyway, will probably always be students who buy textbooks, but there's also a lot of students who don't buy the textbook and therefore just don't do the readings. And so I think this is, maybe the angle that I would take with this is, are you actually impacting sales, or is it just that you're providing those students who wouldn't purchase that book, providing them with access to the resource? I feel like I'm getting up on my soapbox a little bit here. I'm trying not to do that.
Oh, bless you. Everyone loves a good soapbox.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at that.
Me too. Me too. There'll be too many soapboxes if we're not fair. So I've got a question here that you know, I'll say a few things about as well, but maybe to the panel first. What are some methods that can be utilised to promote library resources to the faculty and to students?
Zara, should I go?
Jesse, I think that's...
All right, I'll take this. So I think what I've seen here is, first of all, think about their time. You know, we know that faculty are very busy. It takes a lot of time for them. I actually see there's a question here related to some of the administrative work that faculty are taking on, you know, over the last several years. So we know that faculty are busy, and I would say think about that as you're promoting your library collection. How hard is it for faculty to use your resources? What hoops do they have to jump through? How many forms do they have to fill out? Kind of think about what's involved from their side. From an administration perspective, you know, how can they let you know, and how can you make that easier for them? But then I think the other big piece that really does resonate with faculty is the student experience, and being able to share, you know, stories or examples of, you know, students who will be more successful in your course if you can provide more affordable resources, or again, numbers about, you know, what it might mean for a student. There's a number of, I think, really impactful surveys that exist out there about, you know, student affordability and students not be able to afford meals because they're buying textbooks. So I think those are the two angles that I really see resonate. One, how can it be easy for them to use library resources, and also the value that that brings to the students. I think those are the two biggest pieces that I would say. Make sure you don't forget about when you're talking about these things.
Excellent. Zara, have you got anything you wanted to add there, or?
Yeah, I'll just jump in there and say one of the things we've been hearing from students a lot more, particularly when we start thinking about that from a diversity, equity, inclusion sort of background as well, is how much the message coming from their peers and other students really helps to resonate what the library can do, what the library can impact, and how it can help. And we've really heard that those conversations on the ground have actually been really quite effective and impactful for sort of promoting those resources both to students.
Excellent. And just from my perspective, I guess, you know, we very much have a student-centric approach to our products, and you know, one of the things that we're trying to do with the Campus M platform is to engage the students on the platforms that they're at, and provide an engagement platform that really drives traffic to the library, because, you know, libraries are such an invaluable resource, whether it's, you know, access to materials, you know, increasingly whether it's space and areas to collaborate as a true learning space, if you like. Our focus is on trying to bring the library to the students, bring all the services, the events, the skills, the knowledge, the resources that the library has, bring that to the students so they know it's there. Because quite often, you know, unfortunately, when we talk to students, the library can very quickly get pigeonholed as a place for books, and I only need to worry about that assessment times and assignment times. Well, actually, you know, there is an awful lot of value that the library brings. It's just the students not aware of that. And so, you know, with our Campus M library solution, you know, our ideas are about bringing that to the student, bring what you do to the student sooner.
Just kind of smirking a bit as you were talking, Matt, because it's not only about, you know, the students pigeonholing the library. Actually, one of the things that's in the library journal report, I think on the the like what are the barriers to using library resources. Some of the write-in responses were, my students don't want print resources. So faculty actually saw the library as kind of a provider of print resources or a provider of books. They said, my students want videos. And I saw that, it was a small enough number, so I didn't mention it earlier, but you reminded me of that when you were talking about this perception of what the library is and what the library provides.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we need, the library's moved on, it's evolved, but maybe the communication and getting that message across, there needs to be more effort there. I've got a question. I think it's a question. We'll see whether it turns into a question as from Rebecca as a library liaison coordinator. I've reached out to the faculty several times over the last years about input and resources they'd like us to purchase. We also let them know we require material, but we continue to get poor participation in this process from faculty. Now, I don't know whether there's a tool out there, Jessie, that can maybe help that. I don't know whether you want to comment, Jessie?
I'm really trying not to be like too salesy on this presentation. I'll say, Rebecca, you are not alone, absolutely, in what you're experiencing here, this poor participation in this process from faculty. I certainly hear this all over the place. It's not only you, it's not only your faculty. I'm sure you're not thinking that it is. So I guess the thing that I would have you think about with this is maybe you're probably doing this already, but thinking about what it is from their side. And I think I said this before, but how can you make it easier for them? How can you make it so that it's not, an extra thing that they need to do? Can you, say, send me your syllabus and we'll add links? Or, I know the library is also not just like full of all this spare time, but I think thinking about how the library and the work that you're doing can sort of fit in with the workflows of what faculty already have to do. Like, what do they already have to do to prepare for their course? What do they already have to do to make students know what's being used? And how can the library kind of embed yourselves into those workflows so it's not like an extra step that they need to take? It's not, I need to do all this stuff to get ready for my course, and then also I need to talk to the library. I have one solution that does this. This is the goal of Leganto, actually, is to embed the library into those workflows. But I think there's probably other ways that you could do that as well if you're thinking about it from that perspective.
Excellent. Thanks, Jessie. I've got a question here from a colleague on the call. Our collection policy at our college is not purchasing textbooks. How could I talk to my colleagues about changing this to accommodate students better?
Mm-hmm. I'll take this. I'm sorry, Zara. I'm taking all of them. I'll let you answer something. Actually, I saw this question come in and it really resonated with me because not that long ago, one of our customers told me that they had actually recently changed their collection development policy to try to purchase as many resources as they could, that faculty had requested, or that faculty had said that they were using in their courses. What they said is that this turned out to be a really great way to get faculty to engage with the library. So going back to the question before about this kind of low adoption from faculty, this is something to think about. And this came up in the survey. The library doesn't have what I need. If you go through these hoops to work with the library and then the library doesn't have what you need, you're not likely to try again next year, I think. So this is an area where the library can potentially, partner with faculty and say, like, we will buy one copy. I know there's budget issues with this, so I don't want to address that. But if you're trying to change your policy, this might be the way to think about it, is what impact might that have on your relationship with faculty, on faculty willingness to talk to you about what they're using in their courses. It may be that they're not using textbooks, and now that you're opening up these communication channels, you can kind of point to other resources that you have or alternative resources that you have. But I do think that this is an area where it is potentially an opportunity to show faculty that you're there, that you are working with them, that you do want to partner with them. And I know this is also an area where I mentioned before, libraries can report on some kind of large numbers, but if you can report on, you know, what it means to the students that the library is providing these resources, how much is this textbook collection potentially saving for students? What I've seen is that those numbers add up very quickly when you're looking at it across the institution, or the number of students who are benefiting from this. So it can be a great way to show the impact of your collection budget, the impact that it has on students. But you could also, again, think about partnerships with bookstores or partnerships with student unions or instructors or things like that to get other copies of these books as well.
Excellent. I'm sorry, but Margaret asked a great question here. So what is it that Campus M contributes to student success? And so I feel I have to answer that question. Someone asked me directly. So so let me give you a little discussion about Campus M and the Campus M library feature set. You know, what we're trying to do, and it comes back to that, the point that both Sarah and Jesse rose about communication, and trying to break down some of those barriers of communication and just really get the library flowing into the students, you know, maybe not everyday life, but certainly into, you know, their understanding of what's available. So, you know, Campus M is about providing a set of services through typically mobile, but, you know, also the web, and promoting the services that the library has to offer. And that's not just, you know, search and discovery and, you know, access to reading materials. It's all the events that you deliver, the skills classes, the exhibitions, all that ancillary stuff that can really enrich what the student is doing. And you know, a lot of that goes unseen. So, you know, I would say alongside a lot of other stuff, you know, the key thing that we're trying to do with the Campus M engagement platform is to engage the student and embed the library into the students' daily lives, and, you know, really help the library become more central to what the student is doing day by day as part of their academic, you know, studies and such like. So that was a long-winded answer, but someone asked me, so I feel that I've got to respond. I'm just wondering, Sarah, because I feel that we've kind of left you out, and I just maybe want to, just as we close the session, just maybe a final thought for you, and, you know, really feeding on generally about the survey, not necessarily about access, but, you know, were there any other key messages more generally in the survey that you think, you know, you might want to call out and just give us some insights in?
Yeah, sure, Matt. And yeah, it's always a difficulty when you come from the student perspective, and then you start to get into what it means internally for people, and it gets a bit lost there, doesn't it? That's absolutely fine. I think it was really about how there's something about how much people are actually reading, and maybe this comes back actually to the point Jesse made earlier about student interest in some of these things. So I think I was quite shocked that 1 in 50 students aren't reading anything that's assigned to them, which I know is small numbers, but actually you go, well, what's happening there? Like, how do you get to that point, and how do you reach some of those students that are really, really hard to engage with, that perhaps and they're often the ones that sometimes fall through the gaps as well. And when we start to think about not just success but retention, some of those areas where that actually may be a way to find those students, who are they that aren't using those services, and can you impact on that as well?
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, you mentioned there, we've talked a lot about success, but maybe there's a role there to understand how engaged students are with material also reflects something around retention and maybe, you know, how you could intervene there. So look, I really want to thank Zara, Jessie, for putting up with me, and for the audience for putting up with me and my lack of switching from mute to unmute and all the rest of it. And everyone, you know, for their fabulous questions. I think it's been a really interesting and lively discussion as well. I'm going to hand you back to Bill just to close up. But thank you again. Thank you for your attention. And, you know, we'll speak to you soon. Bill.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Thank you so much to Zara, Jessie, and Matt for taking the time to speak with us today. And thank you to our attendees as well for your questions and comments. I'd like to remind our viewers that we did record today's program, so be on the lookout for a follow-up email from Choice and ACRL with a link to that recording. Also, if you have a few minutes after the presentation to fill out a brief survey, we would really appreciate it. And thanks again to all of you out there for joining us today. We hope you learned something new from this session and hope to see you again in the near future for another webinar.